critical media literacy, I think, is an important and empowering tool to have for many reasons. And I think a lot of media users like intuitively understand what the basic framework is and what it can do for them. You know, we all feel unsatisfied with things we've read or watched in the news, but it can be sometimes hard to figure out what to do with all that, where to start, what questions to ask in order to sort of reach something that's maybe more useful in the long term. And that, starts with examining, the power dynamics in the media, who's allowed to create the messages we're receiving, and what are those messages and what emotions or values are they appealing to, what's being excluded and why, and so on. And a perfect example of this, and I'm sure you've heard a lot of in these interviews, is Washington Post, owned by Jeff Bezos, which is ridiculous for like a million reasons. But, Bezos can say all he wants, that he's not interested in like micromanaging the editorial staff at the Post, but we know the conflicts of interest that can affect journalists' ability to look critically and say the labor practices at Amazon. They cover it, but what are they missing? What are they, deliberately censoring? Where can we look for more information? And independent media is a big palate cleanser in that way. And when you start to make comparisons, it can transform the way that you consume media and makes you more responsible in the way that you share things. And truthfully, I think as helpful as that is, I think it's also scary for a lot of people to confront, uncritically consuming media for maybe as long as they have. It was for me. Like, I took a class in college and I was like, I can't believe it took me this long to think about things this way. I was a little bit embarrassed, but it was really valuable lesson, and it's made me, a stronger thinker, a better writer, researcher. And it's made me a more active participant, rather than just like passively taking it all in like I was used to. Well, in addition to not being beholden to corporate interests, like I mentioned before with the Post, I think, independent reporting is also vital for its pattern of addressing marginalized or underrepresented voices and communities and issues that the establishment press historically neglects, which is, the foundation of Project Censored's top 25 list. Independent journalists also understand the power of community engagement in their reporting. Underrepresentation is an issue in the news, but so is misrepresentation, which is something that I think the corporate media is often guilty of. So like, for example, when I studied the difference in corporate and independent coverage of community level gun violence in the United States, I found that the corporate media were less likely to use community members, including community organizers or activists and relatives of shooting victims, as sources in their reporting. And they often preferred like law enforcement or government officials. And they treated these shootings as like random instead of part of a systemic issue tied to racism, redlining, other deep-rooted inequities that, these communities had been talking about for ages. So, independent coverage gave community members a voice. And they also focused on community-based solutions to community level gun violence that corporate media paid, little attention to. So I think that's a big part of it for me. Independent media, there's often, a stronger emphasis on people. I think critical media literacy and independent journalism go hand in hand in a big way. And that's because I think, once you add sort of critical media literacy to your toolkit, you're then, really motivated to seek out people-centered independent journalism, because that's not what you're seeing in the corporate media. And that's especially important during an election year because, there's evidence that horse race journalism, which focuses more on like who's ahead, who's behind, what the polling shows, et cetera, can actually foster distrust of political candidates and news outlets. And, it leaves people feeling like their vote really doesn't matter at all. So journalism that focuses on the issues that, fundamentally affect people's everyday lives, and understanding where candidates stand on those issues, not only now, but, in the past, is what I think many disillusioned voters might be looking for. But I think this kind of journalism is crucial for civic engagement beyond voting in elections. What we're seeing now is, Israel's indiscriminate bombing kills Palestinians by the thousands, people calling, emailing their representatives, demanding a ceasefire, protesting in large numbers in cities all over the country, engaging in powerful discourse. That to me shows that people are rejecting corporate media's usual approach, which is to completely deprive readers of context. People are looking elsewhere. They're reading about the historical context of this moment. They're following up independently and being, active media participants. And I hope that continues. I guess for this upcoming election and all elections, I worry about voter suppression, that, everybody that wants to vote is able to cast their vote free from intimidation and, structural discriminatory barriers, and that the very people who are supposed to serve the people are in many ways making it more difficult to participate in elections in states like North Carolina, Ohio, Georgia, Florida, others. And as we know, these unfair policies disproportionately affect people of color. So there's that concern. My hope is that people understand that there are journalists and reporters whose mission is to serve the public, tell the truth, hold, people accountable, people in power accountable. And, they may not be where you were looking previously. So it's important now to seek out, independent news sources who have a proven track record of covering issues that are ignored by the establishment press, and, support those outlets whenever possible. And, I don't know. I mean, civic engagement, as I've said before, goes beyond electoral elections. There are so many ways to stay engaged politically: organizing, protesting, writing, reading, thinking critically about how you consume media and how you share things, with your communities, with your families, with your friends, via social media or wherever. And that's all important, and it will all still be important long after this election is over.